Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, heart racing, suddenly aware that one day you simply won't exist? That crushing realization that hits like a freight train in the darkness? The undeniable fact that death is coming for all of us? Most people try to push this thought away immediately. They distract themselves, scroll through their phones, or convince themselves it's just anxiety. Our society has conditioned us to view death as a taboo, something to be avoided at all costs. We've built an ecosystem of denial filled with endless distractions and nonstop entertainment, just so we don't have to face life's most fundamental question: what happens when it all ends? But what if I told you that this very fear, this terror that society teaches us to suppress, might actually be the key to unlocking the most profound freedom your mind has ever experienced? What if that late-night anxiety wasn't a sign of weakness, but an invitation to a more purposeful, more meaningful life? Carl Jung, the revolutionary Swiss psychiatrist who dared to explore the deepest corners of the human psyche, discovered 4 forbidden truths about our fear of death. Truths so powerful they were considered dangerous by his contemporaries. They destabilized the narrative of a society that was built on hiding death away. Truths that, when understood, don't just reduce your fear of dying, they completely transform how you live. The first forbidden truth: death anxiety as life energy. Jung's first forbidden truth is perhaps the most counterintuitive. Your fear of death isn't a weakness. It's actually irrefutable proof of your life force. Think about it. An inanimate object doesn't fear death because it has no consciousness of life. A stone doesn't panic about its eventual erosion because it lacks the capacity to perceive itself as a finite being. But you fear death precisely because you are so magnificently, intensely alive. The fear isn't a defect. It's the silent roar of your biology, screaming that you are a miracle of consciousness, that your life matters. It is the shadow cast by the unbearable brightness of our will to live. Jung considered this a fundamental law of the human psyche. Life and death exist in a dynamic, interdependent relationship. One cannot be fully understood without the other. Jung observed that patients who claimed to have absolutely no fear of death were often the most psychologically troubled. They had disconnected from their life energy, their libido, their essential vitality. They were, in a sense, psychologically dead before they ever physically died. The absence of fear was not a sign of enlightenment, but rather a symptom of a profound disconnection from their own existence. They were living in a mental state so detached from reality that their very mortality seemed abstract. They had suppressed their deepest instincts for self-preservation to such an extent that the impulse to live was barely a whisper. This internal apathy, Jung noted, was a breeding ground for depression and existential aimlessness. This changes everything. Instead of seeing death anxiety as a pathology to be cured, Jung saw it as valuable information. A message from the deepest part of your psyche telling you that your life has value, that your existence has meaning, that something within you absolutely refuses to be extinguished. It's your unconscious mind nudging you, begging you to truly live. It is the raw energy of existence pushing back against the apathetic comforts of a mundane life. This powerful internal signal, often masked by modern anxieties, is a primal call to action. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. Jung discovered that people who learn to sit with this fear, to really feel it without immediately running away, often experience what he called a transformation of consciousness. They stop living like they're already dead, going through the motions, avoiding risks, playing it safe, and start living as if they are truly and uniquely alive. They understand on a visceral level that the only way to defeat the fear of death is by honoring the life it protects. The fear of losing life becomes the very engine for living every moment. It becomes a compass, pointing you towards your most authentic and fulfilling path. This conscious embrace of mortality is a powerful act of defiance against a culture that tries to make us forget our own impermanence. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps more than you think. Now let's continue. The second forbidden truth Jung uncovered is how our entire civilization is built on a massive, collective denial of death. And this denial is making us profoundly sick in ways we can barely perceive, a deep and diffuse malaise that permeates modern society. Look around you. Absolutely everything in our culture is designed to make us forget that death exists. Youth is worshipped, aging is feared, and the signs of getting older are cosmetically erased. Death itself is sanitized and hidden away in antiseptic hospitals and distant funeral homes, where most people never have to confront it directly. We have outsourced the process of dying, making it impersonal and detached. This creates a social system where finitude, suffering, and vulnerability are pushed to the margins, making us terribly unprepared to handle them when they inevitably arise. We live in a culture of eternal adolescence, a society that refuses to grow up and face the ultimate reality. The very foundation of our consumerism, our endless entertainment, and our relentless pursuit of novelty is a desperate attempt to buy our way into immortality. But this collective denial comes at a tremendous cost. When we refuse to acknowledge death, we also refuse to acknowledge how precious and limited life is. We spend entire years on empty pursuits, in soul-draining jobs, in toxic relationships, and in endless scrolling, because somewhere deep down, we believe we have infinite time. We think we can postpone happiness and fulfillment, as if life were an appointment that can be easily rescheduled for tomorrow. This is the great illusion that allows us to procrastinate our own growth, trading it for temporary comfort and superficial security. It is a silent pact with mediocrity. Jung noticed something profound in his patients. Those who had faced death directly, whether through a serious illness, a near-death experience, or deep psychological work, often reported feeling more alive than they ever had before. They stopped wasting time on trivial things. They became more authentic, more present, more real. They understood in a way that words cannot capture that time is the most valuable resource we have, and that every second is a gift we cannot take for granted. Death became the great equalizer, a relentless reminder that what we do with our time is all that truly matters. A society that denies death creates people who forget how to live. The forbidden truth here is that our culture's obsession with avoiding death has created a population of the walking dead. People who are alive but not truly living, who are breathing but not truly present, who are existing but not experiencing the full depth of what it means to be human. They are ghosts in their own lives, haunted by a mortality they refuse to acknowledge. The denial of death is, in itself, a form of death. It turns us into passive spectators rather than active participants in our own existence, condemning us to a life of quiet desperation and unfulfilled potential. Jung's third forbidden truth is the most transformative. Confronting your mortality is the fastest, most direct path to becoming who you really are. Jung called this process individuation, the psychological journey of becoming a complete, integrated individual rather than just a collection of social roles and expectations. And he discovered that nothing accelerates this process like a genuine encounter with your own mortality. For Jung, death was not the end of the journey, but the ultimate, most potent starting point for self-discovery. The threat of annihilation forces the psyche to get brutally honest. When you truly grasp at your core that your time is a finite resource, something profound and irreversible happens. The masks you wear to please others, the good son, the reliable employee, the perfect partner, fall away, revealing the raw and vulnerable person underneath. The pretenses you've built to feel safe and secure, the relentless pursuit of career status, the accumulation of material goods, the manufactured social media persona, crush and crumble. You stop caring so much about what others think and start caring deeply about what your soul needs. You begin to distinguish between what society has programmed you to want and what you actually authentically desire. It's the moment when your life stops being a never-ending dress rehearsal and becomes the main performance, with all its beautiful flaws and raw, unfiltered beauty. Jung observed that his patients who had faced death, either literally through a life-threatening illness or symbolically through deep psychological work, experienced what he called a death and a rebirth of the personality. They shed their false selves like a snake sheds its skin, a painful but necessary process of disowning and releasing the parts of them that were not real. What emerged was a more authentic, more integrated, more whole human being. This process of symbolic death freed them to live a life that was true to their deepest self. The death of the ego became the very foundation for building a genuine, purposeful self. This is why Jung considered death anxiety to be sacred. It's not just a fear, it's a sacred call to transformation. It's your psyche telling you, the clock is ticking. You're running out of time to become who you really are. Stop wasting your precious life being someone else. This existential dread, when faced with courage, becomes the ultimate mentor. It guides you away from mediocrity and toward a life of meaning. Death whispers, stop pretending to be someone else. The people who ignore this whisper often reach the end of their lives filled with regret, wondering who they might have been if they'd had the courage to be themselves. They lived a life full of comfort and security, but utterly empty of meaning. But those who listen, who allow their mortality to guide them toward authenticity, discover something extraordinary. They become free, free to live without excuses, without masks, without the weight of expectations that were never their own. This is the ultimate freedom, the freedom to be yourself no matter the cost. The fourth forbidden truth, the transcendent function of death awareness. Jung's final and most forbidden truth is this: when you fully accept your mortality, you gain access to a form of consciousness that transcends the ordinary boundaries of the ego and time. This isn't mystical nonsense. It's a psychological fact deeply rooted in the human experience. Jung discovered that patients who had integrated their death awareness often reported experiences of what he called the transcendent function. Moments where they felt that the death of the ego was not the end of everything, but rather a kind of transition, a dissolution of the individual self into something greater. They felt connected to something that went far beyond their particular existence. They felt a part of something that transcended them, a collective, timeless human story. They began to see their lives not as isolated, meaningless events, but as part of a grand pattern, a greater story unfolding through the ages. They felt an undeniable connection to past generations who had lived and died before them, and to future generations who would carry on after they were gone. Their individual death became less terrifying because they recognized their participation in something eternal. It was as if they saw their single life as a delicate and valuable thread, woven into the vast, timeless tapestry of humanity. The death of the body was not the end of the thread, but its fusion with the greater fabric. Jung noticed that these individuals often developed what he termed cosmic consciousness, an awareness that while their personal ego would die, something essential about their existence would continue. Not necessarily in a religious sense of an afterlife, but in the profound psychological sense that their actions, their love, their contribution to the world and the people around them would propagate and resonate through time, influencing those who would come after. The cycle of life and death was not a straight line with a final endpoint, but a continuous spiral that connected them to every human being who has ever existed and will ever exist. In accepting death, you discover what is eternal within you. This is perhaps the most liberating realization of all. When you stop trying to preserve your ego forever You discover and embrace aspects of yourself that are genuinely timeless. Your capacity for boundless love, your moments of genuine wisdom, your unwavering resilience in the face of pain, your authentic contributions to others, all of these transcend your physical existence. Death becomes not a terrifying end, but a portal, a gateway to the profound realization that your impact is your true legacy. You realize that your life is not just about you, but about your contribution to the ongoing flow of human existence. And that, in itself, is a form of immortality more real and meaningful than any promise of paradise. So how do you integrate these 4 forbidden truths into your daily life? Jung provided a practical framework that he used with his patients, and it's surprisingly simple, yet it requires discipline and courage. First, he encouraged what he called death meditation, not a morbid obsession, but a regular, gentle contemplation of your mortality. He suggested dedicating just 5 minutes a day, simply sitting with the reality that your life will end. This isn't meant to depress you, it's meant to wake you up, to remind you of the urgency and preciousness of every passing second. The question to be asked is simple, but powerful. If this were my last day, would I be satisfied with what I did today? The honest answer to that question will make your priorities absolutely clear. Second, Jung suggested using death as what he called an advisor. Before making any important decision, big or small, ask yourself, if I knew I had only 1 year to live, what would I choose to do? This question cuts through the noise of social expectations and fear-based thinking, revealing what truly matters to you. It illuminates the path to your truth, showing what your soul genuinely craves without the distortion of modern life's clamor. Third, he recommended what modern psychologists call legacy thinking, regularly contemplating what you want to leave behind, not just in material terms, but in terms of impact, love, and meaning. This connects you directly to the transcendent function, helping you see beyond your individual mortality. Your legacy is not what you accumulate, but what you create and share. It's your way of becoming part of the human story and leaving an indelible mark. Finally, Jung emphasized the importance of what he called creative expression in the face of death. Whether through art, relationships, work, or service, actively creating something meaningful becomes a form of immortality, a way of transcending your physical limitations through the things you bring into the world. It's your way of saying, I was here and I made my difference. The result of this integration is not a life lived in constant dread of death, but rather a life lived in constant awareness of life's preciousness. You stop living like a sleepwalker with empty hands and closed eyes. You become more present, more authentic, more alive than you've ever been. Jung's patients who completed this work often reported the same thing. They were no longer afraid of death because they had learned how to truly live. They discovered that the fear of death, when properly understood and integrated, becomes the greatest teacher life has to offer. Death feared is life unlived. Death accepted is life unleashed. In our final moments together today, I want you to consider this. Every moment you spend avoiding the reality of death is a moment you spend avoiding the reality of life. Every day you pretend you're immortal is a day you rob yourself of mortality's gifts, urgency, presence, authenticity, and the profound motivation to become who you really are. Jung's forbidden truths about death aren't meant to frighten you. They're meant to free you. They're an invitation to stop living as if you have forever and start living as if every moment matters. Because it does. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate your fear of death. It's to transform that fear into the fuel for a life fully lived. Your mortality isn't your enemy. It's your greatest teacher, your most honest advisor, and ultimately, your path to freedom. The next time that middle-of-the-night realization hits you, that awareness of your own impermanence, don't push it away. Sit with it. Listen to what it's trying to tell you, Because in that darkness, in that moment of raw truth, lies the key to everything you've been searching for. In our next video, we'll explore Jung's revolutionary insights about the shadow self and why the parts of yourself you hate the most might be the keys to your greatest power. Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one. And of course, subscribe for more high-value content. Onward, thinkers.